All right. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to Standing for Truth. My name is Matt, and I will be your host and moderator for this evening's much anticipated debate on the Genesis flood. I'm thrilled to have Professor David McQueen and Dok here with me to debate this important topic. The Genesis flood is on trial. David McQueen is taking the affirmative, so he'll be going first, and Dok is taking the negative. So, gentlemen, before we begin this opening statement, let's break the ice with a short introduction into who you are and what you're doing today. David, I guess we can start with you. Let me take you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I am a retired university professor and have been interested in this creation evolution debate for 50 years now. 50 years ago, actually 55, truth be known, I had my first creation evolution debate in high school. And what would be most important, I think, to the audience in my background is that from 1983 to 1987, I was on staff with the Institute for Creation Research, working under the late Dr. Henry Morris and Dwayne Gish also, who's passed on. And during that period of time, I was able to begin my research in earnest, if you will, about the Genesis flood. And so as we go through the next 2 hours worth of argument, I want you to know how much I appreciate the opportunity to be in this debate forum. I have looked at my opponent's previous debates and am very impressed with his professionalism. So I'm very glad to be debating you tonight, sir.
Awesome. Thank you, David. Dok, if you have a YouTube channel or anything you want to promote as well, feel free.
Well, I do indeed have a YouTube channel, but first I'd like to say thank you for agreeing to this debate, David. Thank you, Matt, for moderating, and thank you, Donny, for hosting it on your channel. I'm Dr. Dino, or Dok for short. I am a paleontology student, currently searching for a grad school to attend, and I've been frankly obsessed with geology and paleontology all my life. Debates such as this have become rather interesting to me as of late, and I've seen a few of David's debates in the past as well. And I very much look forward to this. As for my channel, it's the same as my name here, Dr. Dino. I mostly do I do streams every week about creationist arguments that I find unconvincing. I also sometimes upload videos about different dinosaurs just because I think they're cool and they're fun.
Awesome. All right. So before we jump into this, I'm going to go over the format for everyone tonight. There's going to be a 12-minute opening, starting with David, followed by a 12-minute kind of response. And each are going to get 8 minutes for that rebuttal back and forth. And then we will take a 5-minute break right in the middle of all of this, go over announcements. And then there'll be a 40-minute discussion with a 5-minute closing, and then 25 minutes of audience Q&A. So make sure that you tag Standing for Truth. He is here helping gather questions and compiling them for the very end of this debate. And we are about to get going with this. David, you were going to start, but before we began, Dok actually wanted to mention something to you, I believe, before your time starts. So I can hand it over.
Thank you. And I just want to say quick, if anyone hears any clanking or clattering in the background, a girlfriend and I just got a new chair, and she is cleaning it up in the other room. That's it.
Okay.
I'd like to do a little forward before we get into the actual debate.
All right, got it.
David, I would like you to show me evidence that cannot be accounted for by traditional geology. In my estimation, we have a fairly cohesive understanding of the natural world and how to extrapolate into the past using our knowledge of present phenomena. And I do want to make it clear for the audience, this is not a debate on the age of the Earth. This is not a debate on evolution. This is a debate about if there was ever a global flood. I've asked David to stick to physical evidence and not rely on scripture. If the evidence for a worldwide flood is truly out there, then it should be apparent to everybody, regardless of their religious background. I'm coming to you as a fellow geologist who can be swayed by new evidence. So, I look forward to seeing what you have to show. Let's put on a good one for the audience.
Very well, I agree.
All right, David, whenever you would like to start, I will begin the timer, and you have 12 minutes.
Okay, very well. Let me change the style in light of what my opponent has said. I will not go over any arguments about the historicity of the Bible, at least not now. Maybe as the debate goes on, I might go into that. But for now, I will stick to what I believe are some very good arguments for a worldwide flood based on several things. I want to start with an argument that is based on the presence of chalk. I live in Louisiana, and if I were to drive 5 hours to the west, I would find a chalk deposit that's called the Austin chalk, and it is considered by evolutionary geologists as being Cretaceous. It is in East Texas. Occasionally in the Austin chalk, there are some bird fossils, but that's very rare. What I want to focus on for this first point here is the coccolithospores, which are microscopic shell fragments found in the Austin chalk. And I'm going to challenge my opponent to explain to me how the chalk in Texas, as you go over to the Appalachian Mountains, then up over through the extent of the Appalachians up into Canada, and then put the continents back together. Continental separation, in my view, happened during the flood, but we have continental separation. And so you can take the chalk of Texas and take it all the way over to Dover, England, to the famous White Cliffs of Dover. And at the locality in Dover, you certainly find the abundance of the chalk, and many high schools have some chalk that is from Dover from the old days. Now, even though some of the same fossils are found between the Austin chalk and the locality in England, it is separated by quite a distance, obviously. The White Cliffs of Dover are 300 feet in thickness, and that's a tremendous amount of fossil algae. Now, the question for us tonight is, does this locality represent a 70 million year old stratigraphic unit, or something that was created thousands of years ago? Well, what fascinates me about this locality of chalk is you can trace stratigraphically that same chalk from the English Channel over into Germany. And then I want to make reference to Ager, Ager, not a creationist, not anybody that has anything to, any bones to pick about anything. He makes an interesting comment that that same unit that you can see in Germany, you can also see in northern Turkey. And Agah uses the argument that here we have persistent facies. This is an example of a persistent facies. Now, if we're going to present an argument for a worldwide flood, it would make sense that facies would be persistent over great distances, since I'm arguing for a worldwide event. The next argument I'd like to use is an argument based on ore deposits. My degree of my area of specialization at the University of Michigan, where I got a master's degree in geology, was copper, lead, zinc, gold, silver. And so the ore deposits of the earth have been of interest to me in throughout my career. I finished at Michigan in 1979. And one of the things that fascinates me is that most ore deposits are the result of what are called hydrothermal brines. For those of you watching our presentation tonight, this is simply hydrothermal, means hot water, and a brine is hot, salty water. Now, the reason that is so important in my argument is that as you look at ore deposits worldwide, you find that these ore deposits have been formed through the action of this hot, salty water. The flood model provides an evidence in my mind, or an explanation in my mind, for where all that hot, salty water comes from. And therefore, the Great Flood is the best theory when it comes to the origin of ore deposits. The final point I want to make in this introductory time, and I do want to return to this as we go through the next 2 hours, is what can be called the move my charts around here a bit. The final argument can be made about the nature of fossils, of fossilization worldwide. My former boss, Dr. Dwayne Gish, always talked about what I've come to call the Gish two-step dance. And this dance involves two things. When you find fossils in, for example, whether it's the Austin chalk, or an example I'll bring in later on of trilobites found in Wales and East Tennessee, where I grew up in the Southern Appalachian Mountains, those fossils appear fully formed. So they're fully formed, number one. And number two, they appear abruptly. Now, how do those two arguments tie into my claim of a worldwide flood? Well, the fact that fossils appear fully formed, I've hiked the canyon over the years several times. From 1983 to 1986, I hiked the canyon 5 times, the Grand Canyon, and I purposely looked for any transition that I could see in the Cambrian sequence there with the trilobites, and then on all the way through the top of the Grand Canyon on the south rim at least, where you see evidence of reptile footprints in the Coconino sandstone. So I've looked for this in my personal experience and had my students look for it in those days. And we never found any transitional forms in the Grand Canyon. And so when we did find fossils there, we found them fully formed, and they appeared abruptly in the record. Keep me on track, please. How much time do I have left?
2 minutes.
2 minutes, thank you. And so when I look at evidences for the worldwide flood, we can go through the argument about chalk, about ore deposits, and I'd like to bring in a new thing that I have been studying, and that is paleobotany, and that's the whole issue of the evolution of plants. And I want to challenge my opponent to explain to me how you might get from something like a fern all the way up to a tulip poplar tree like I have in my backyard here in Louisiana, or an oak or something like that. If it seems as if we lack transitional organisms in, let's say, vertebrate fossils, let's switch gears to paleobotany and show me fossil evidence for the evolution of plants from something like a fern all the way through something like a tulip poplar or an oak tree. Those paleobotanical missing links are truly as missing as the others when we talk about a creature like a trilobite. Thank you very much. That'll be my introduction.
All right. Thank you very much. Dok, you are on mute. And if you would like to share screen, let me know, and I will get you ready.
All right, thank you. Sorry, just putting a couple things together here.
No problem. I won't start the time until you're ready.
Okay. So I'll go through these in the order you presented them, David. First of all, talking about different chalks. So the main gist of your argument seems to be why are chalk deposits so widespread from, well, what conventional geology would call the late Cretaceous, mid to late Cretaceous. So based partly on the chalk and other indicators, it appears that sea levels have changed in the past. They've gone up and they've gone down. We can see this very easily with the last ice age. We know that there used to be a massive land bridge between Siberia and Alaska because sea levels were lower because so much water was trapped in glaciers. The opposite has happened in the past. Sea levels have been much higher, and it appears that they were higher during the mid to late Cretaceous. For the chalk in Austin, that probably came from the Midland Sea that North America had during the late Cretaceous. And I mean, similarly for England and for Turkey. Sea levels were higher, so some parts of the coast were submerged. If you go to modern coastlines where coccolithophores can be found, you'll find them forming the same sort of strata. Okay. Next, you talk about ore deposits from hydrothermal brines. And you say that the flood would have been really hot water, and that would have carried these ores with them. I think I understand what you're saying here. But the problem is we know that as we go deeper into the Earth, temperatures get hotter. I forget the exact rule of thumb, but I believe it's about 1 degree Celsius every 20 to 30 meters or so. Meaning, if you go down a few hundred meters, you're going to get water that's close to boiling, if not above it, and only remains water due to the high pressures. When water is under high pressure, it can precipitate out different minerals or ores. It can also just do that if it's too saturated with them. Or if it temporarily cools, it lowers its carrying capacity, and it drops minerals. That pretty easily explains most ore deposits. Not all of them. Some of them are from organisms that lived in the ocean, as an example. It's complicated. It depends on what mineral you want to talk about. Next, you brought up fossilization worldwide, basically. The abrupt appearance of fully formed organisms. So, real quickly, go through some of the ones you described. You described trilobites and whales. Why did they appear fully formed in the fossil record? For trilobites, so going back a few decades, I would have agreed with you that they appear to just appear. However, recently, we've discovered what appear to be precursors to trilobites in Precambrian rock. One of them being Spragina, which basically looks like a trilobite, except it doesn't have a differentiated head. And there are others, not just that one, but that's one that's really easy to see the resemblance. For whales, we have transitional fossils of whales, and the majority of other extant groups and extinct groups. They all share shared derived features that they appear to have from their ancestors and carried on to further generations. This isn't a debate on evolution, though. So I'll simply say, as we go through the rocks, going into more modern rock, we appear to get forms that are more similar to those of today. Going back, they appear differently. And it seems, in some places, that different lineages split. As an example, the fossils of the earliest whales we have are actually fairly similar to the earliest hippos, as well as similar to an extinct group of animals, well, a couple, called entelodonts and androsarchids. They don't really appear suddenly. Just about everything appears to have a precursor of some sort, going back several 100 million years at the very least. But this isn't a debate about the age of the Earth. And lastly, you mentioned paleobotany. How would we get a fern to turn into a tree? Ferns and trees are separated by, well, they appear to be separated by quite a bit of time. We have ferns popping up first, and then there's a split. Ferns are typically, I don't think they have the woody element that trees have. That appears to be in a separate lineage that trees belong to. So you wouldn't see a fern turning into a modern tree. Would have been a precursor to both that split apart. Now, I'm better with animals than I am with plants, admittedly. And I'm sure there's many transitional forms that I can't think of because I'm not a plant paleontologist. But I am fairly certain that they exist, and this is backed up by modern genetic evidence. So let's see, we talked about persistent rock facies, ore deposits, fossilization. Okay. I think I addressed everything you brought up. So happy to get into the open discussion or a break, whatever you need. So I am finished for now.
All right. That was 6 minutes, a little over. Not bad. All right, David, we have 8 minutes. If you would like to use that time up, I will begin when you are ready to go, and you can answer that. And then again, we go back to Dok, and then break time, and then discussion portion begins. So
to offer, I'm pleased to offer a rebuttal to what he commented about.
Yep.
So let's start with my first argument about the chalk deposits on the different continents. You, Doc, appealed to sea level variations to be able to explain why there would be a very prominent Austin chalk in Texas, and then leading over and then into Europe, additional chalk deposits, and then finally the very prominent chalks that Agar, AGER, talks about in the area of northern Turkey. I don't find the evolutionary argument of sea level variation that I was taught both in my undergraduate days at Tennessee and also my graduate work at the University of Michigan and my additional work as the years have gone on to be convincing in regard to an explanation for why these chalk deposits are where they are. I think that Agar's argument about persistent facies ties in to Dr. Tim Clary's excellent book on what the modern, say, petroleum geologist would call a group of defined units that can be identified and carried worldwide. These units in sequence stratigraphy are given names like Tejas for the uppermost sequence, and then going down through other names all the way down through what is called sequence stratigraphy. Since I am a young Earth flood geologist, I have, through my studies over the years, especially my work with Dr. Bob Gentry at Oak Ridge National Labs and his critique about the radioactive halos providing evidence for a young Earth, not an old Earth. I question whether the Cretaceous really occurred 70 million years ago. Next on my critique list is the issues of ores. I think, once again, my friend, you're misunderstanding the complexity of the ore deposits, let's say, in Tennessee and Missouri. There are a group of lead deposits in Missouri, and then as you go over to Tennessee, there's zinc deposits in the Nashville Basin. And then where I went to school and did a lot of field work in East Tennessee, there are lead zinc deposits that occur in essentially paleokarst environments, collapsed caves, if you will. And you can see evidence of the rapid deposition of these sphalerite ores, the ore for zinc, zinc sulfide, and galena, the lead sulfide. The final area of critique that I didn't speak a lot about, I have in previous debates, but not tonight, about the whole issue of the evolution of whales. I must admit, as a flood geologist and a creation scientist, the very idea that something that was like a cow was on the land and then moved to the sea, and that cow-like creature that was mammalian somehow evolved into a whale, which nurses its young and so forth. While at the University of Michigan, one of my professors in the mid-70s was Professor Gingrich. And those of you that have studied whale evolution or anything about whales would know that Professor Gingrich is a world-renowned expert. And so I went over, made an appointment with him, and I asked him if he would show me the whale transitional organisms that he had at the University of Michigan Natural History Museum. And he was very gracious, spent time showing me the fossils, and I asked him if I could spend some time with the collection and then come back to his office and talk about whale evolution. I did look at the specimens that he presented to me, and they appeared to me to be exactly what Dr. Gish and other creationists have presented as being appearing in the rock record abruptly and fully formed. The evidence for a transition, I must admit, I could not see. Again, Dr. Gingrich was very gracious to me to show me these specimens, but they were, from my own observation, unconvincing. Thank you.
1 minute. 1 minute.
That's okay. I'll yield that time.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Okay, Doc, you are up. 8 minutes.
Just a second. Still writing some notes down.
Sure. And at any point, if you want to share screen, feel free to. And for the audience, if you have any questions, tag Standing for Truth, and I will see them and add them to tonight.
Sure. I will be sharing my screen eventually. Okay. So starting from the top once again. So you said you don't find an appeal to sea level variation convincing. Well, for one, I'm curious why, but also that's not really an argument. I also did a bit more research while you were talking. So the White Cliffs of Dover are associated with an uplift event. It's called the Alpine orogeny, and it appears to have begun when Africa started pushing up into Europe and West Asia. It caused a lot of the mountains in Eastern Africa, the Middle East, and Southern and even Northern Europe. It appears to have caused a lot of uplift, which would account for both the the oceanic deposits we have in both Turkey and England, which again are shallow water deposits anyway. And we can tell that because coccolithophores aren't the only organisms we find preserved there. We find a lot of other shallow water organisms, indicating that the area was once in shallow water. You also mentioned radio halos. We can get into that a bit later, but that's Gentry's work on that isn't convincing. He misunderstands a lot of the complexity of mineral formation and radioactive isotope decay to make his arguments. You said I misunderstood the complexity of ore deposits. I'm not 100% sure what you mean by that, especially since right after that you said most of the ore deposits you've worked with are in a paleokarst environment. Now, that might sound like a bit of word salad for some of you out there. A karst environment is an environment with a lot of groundwater flow. It usually causes a lot of caves and sinkholes. Think of the Midwest, up by the Great Lakes, or Florida, where you have sinkholes. Because water goes through there and it strips out the calcium carbonate, holding a lot of sedimentary rocks together, making it really easy for it to erode. But if the water is really hot, it can pick up minerals and then redeposit them later. We see this in iron ores, lead ores, zinc ores, and other things like quartz. That's how you get stuff like opals. The groundwater picks up quartz and then deposits it in a ton of little crystals. And then lastly, you said Gingrich's specimens for whale evolution weren't convincing to you. I am curious what species he showed you, because there's a lot of variability in whale evolution. As you can see here, if you wouldn't mind popping this up, Matt. So this is a little chart showing some different stages of whale evolution, going from up at the very top. We have Diacodexis, going down to Pachycetus, Ambulocetus, Dorodon, and the modern, I believe, bowfin whale. Let's just call it Balena, because that's what it says here. So, all of these share certain skeletal features in common, which might sound a bit weird at first. They all have pretty similar forelimbs. They all have pretty similar spines. Everything from here down, I believe, has a special joint in the ribs that allows it to flex for, helping to deal with water pressure. In addition, they all have a very specialized inner ear. It's called the involucrum. That might just be a component to the inner ear. But it's something that all modern cetaceans and many fossil ones have. And it makes it so it's easy for them to swim. It helps improve their balance underwater. You mentioned he's talked about whales coming from a cow-like animal. Not exactly. The ancestor of whales appears to have been an ungulate, which is the group modern cows belong to. But back then, they would have been a lot different. And oddly enough, carnivorous. There appear to have once been carnivorous ungulates. Think of it like a little fox or wolf with hooves. That's basically what Diacodexis is up here. Pachycetus sort of looks more like an otter, honestly, when it's fully reconstructed. Ambulocetus, it's almost like a mammal like crocodile. Dorodon, it's basically a modern dolphin, except it still has a pelvis and hind limbs back here. And finally, you get to modern whales, which that, like I said, that is a baleen whale there. But the comparison gets a lot more obvious when you compare it to a modern whale with teeth. Let me find a good picture here. So keep the image of Dorodon in your mind really, really quick. And I raise you. Oh, no, that's not a good picture. Sorry, Google's not being too nice to me. So, the image of Dorodon there. And here's a modern bottlenose dolphin. They are practically identical, except Dorodon has those hind limb flippers. And we do see a rather smooth transition going forward through time. Again, not a debate on evolution, but you wanted to bring up the topic, so I addressed it. And that'll do for my rebuttal.
Okay, that was 6.5 minutes. Pretty good.
We have lost a David.
We did. Actually, this is the 5-minute break time, so actually works out perfect. We'll let him come back, and we will have a 5-minute break, everyone. So we're going to go over some announcements and reminders for upcoming shows for everyone. This is a debate right here. The topic is, are Christians under the law? So obviously this one's going to be pretty good. There are two camps to this field. One says that we are under the biblical law, whether that's Old Testament or New Testament. And then the other viewpoint is that we are saved by grace and no longer under the law. So this is Paul Price versus Sean Griffin, hosted by Donny. I am only filling in for him because he is sick and cannot talk right now. So He will be back soon, probably starting on Monday. The next one, this is going to be a huge debate because geocentrism does very, very popular. And we have Robert Sungenesis, who's been on here before, versus Jackson Rowe. We've had Jackson on multiple times. He debates on multiple different topics. So I'm sure you're familiar with him. And as a quick reminder to everybody, if you've liked the debate so far, feel free to give a thumbs up on this video. Hit subscribe if you haven't. And any questions for anyone in this debate, it would be great. So, just tag Standing for Truth or myself, and I will be grabbing them and saving them. So, mark this one down on the calendar because this is going to be a really popular debate. That one's really good. Dr. Robert Sungenesis has actually written a book on the topic, so he is well-rounded when it comes to any topic regarding that. So, sorry, Donny, next one. Faith alone debate. Is faith alone good enough for salvation? We have, I don't know how to pronounce that name. Got me on this one. Seraphim Hamilton versus Territon Fan. I hope I got that right. Hopefully I didn't butcher that one too much. So I do not know when this one takes place, but we have them. I can actually open that up in another tab and find out when these are actually taking place. Hold on one second. Time frames now on when these are coming up. All right. Faith alone. Let's see when that one is.
So, sorry, really quick.
Yes.
I just realized there were a couple things I probably should bring up that I forgot to in the initial rebuttal. When David gets back, would it be okay if I say them really, really quick?
Yes. Yeah, that would be good because he takes notes on things. So he's probably trying to get back in now. Hopefully his technical problems aren't what caused this. Okay, the geocentrism debate. That is taking place on 10/24, end of the month at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. The one that was just up there, the naturalistic explanation of the universe and life. That takes place in the middle of the month, 10/18, coming up fairly soon. Go ahead, Donny, give me another image. There we go. That's the one. Sal Gardena giving a talk, 10/18, on naturalistic explanations of the universe and life debunked. That one's coming up soon. The next one, if you can. There we go. Mike Ord discussing the flood geology and the age of the earth, questions and answers. This is really good because when we have him on, sometimes there's more questions that come in than there's time to answer. So this is really good. Also bring more questions in. Feel free. Okay. Sorry, I was just reading the private chat, making sure he's good. All right, next one. Dr. Jerry Bergman, and hosted by Standing for Truth again, coming up here soon. Why did God create viruses, bacteria, and other pathogens? That is on 10/17, so the day before the naturalistic explanations talk. And we have another big one coming up on the 16th, which is the day before, and that is a night of eschatology. We have host Standing for Truth again, and he will be giving the stage to here Scott Clem, Sam Frost, Daniel Alderaj. We have Anthony and Quinto, and what is this? I don't even want to pronounce this first name. Feline McFayeth. Anyway, that will be taking place at 5 p.m. on 10/16 coming up. And feel free to tag us with any questions or comments. Phelan. Thank you. And I believe this is the majority of the upcoming talks. Oh, on that first one. Oh, here we go. Is total depravity biblical? Another good one. CJ and Warren are both good debaters. We've had CJ on multiple times on the channel, and he has his own YouTube channel as well. That one is coming up on 11/8, so November 8th at 5 p.m. The Mark Ord was 11/6. And yes, that was the one I did not have ready at the time. That is November 6th at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And we have one more, the atonement debate. Oh. Hold on.
Real quick, I do want to mention there should be an after show after this debate's over. Not 100% sure if I'll be hosting it yet or if someone else will be. We'll have to see on that.
Okay, perfect. Good. I'll keep reminding the audience that you'll be hosting an after show unless someone else decides to.
Yahoo. Oh, and just to do my due diligence as a guest, don't forget to like and subscribe to the stream, folks, either on Donny's channel or mine. Hope you're enjoying so far. Even if we don't agree, hope you're having a wonderful night or day, wherever you are.
Thank you. Awesome. There is one more debate that didn't flash on the screen, but it is called the Atonement Debate, and it will be November 14th at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And now we are in the final countdowns of Dr. McQueen getting back. He messaged, I guess, or somebody called him that he'll be here in about 1 minute. So sorry, everybody.
Okay, I'm back. I hope you can see me now, friends.
Yep. You're doing good.
Had
All right.
some issues there with Google, but I think they're resolved now, if you can both hear me.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
All right. We're going to be jumping into the 40-minute discussion portion of this now. And David, if you would like to actually, who went last? I want to give
Well,
the other person a chance. Yeah, you did. So,
I
David.
did say there were a couple things I forgot to mention. Mind if I do those real quick?
Yeah, go right ahead.
No problem.
Thank you, thank you. First, I talked about how the chalk in how the chalk in both Turkey and England appear to have been uplifted by the Alpine orogeny. The Texas chalk appears to have been uplifted by a separate orogeny, or a mountain building event, that being the one that formed the modern-day Rocky Mountains. Not only the West Coast, but most of the interior U.S. was lifted up in that event. And you can actually see it on a map. It's kind of cool. And lastly, further evidence for whales having evolved from four-footed ancestors. There is a rare condition called an atavism, where modern dolphins or whales can be born with hind flippers, right where their rear legs should be. And that's it. Thank you.
All right. Okay, we will let you guys go back and forth now. David, if you'd like to answer any of those questions and comments.
I would. How much time do I have for this portion?
This is a 40-minute open discussion now, so it'll be up to you guys going back and forth.
I'd like to make a couple of comments, and then because of computer problems on my end, I could not go and get a reference book that I want to use to answer some of these issues about whale evolution. So let me go ahead and give 5 minutes worth of a response or a critique to what I've heard. First, let me make it clear to my opponent and also to the audience that as a young Earth creationist, as a flood geologist, I have no problem with continental separation. Continental drift in a flood model of a young Earth, for example, has to occur more rapidly than in the evolutionary model. But the fact that what many people call the heel of South America fits in to the gap in Africa, I have no problem with that. There's geologic evidence of units that go across that gap, so no problem with that at all. My notebook that deals with the particular fossil specimens that Dr. Gingrich showed me on that day back in, must have been 1977, I'm guessing. I don't have that readily available, but so I don't know exactly which fossil it was, but if you can pick up some comments for me for a minute, I'm going to step away from the computer and go get the references that I missed when I had this internet connection. Can I go ahead and do that now, please?
Can you hear Doc when he talks while you do that, so he can answer some?
Yeah, go ahead and answer, please.
Okay, Doc, take it away.
Sure. So you said you basically have no problems with continental drift.
That's correct.
Okay. So do you accept the current model of orogenies, like how they happen?
Well, yes. The idea that continental, or rather that continents come together, and the example I used when I used to teach Geology 101, good example would be the northwest coast of the U.S., Northern California, Washington, Oregon. It's clear there that there subduction going on, and it explains the volcanic activity of an area like Mount St. Helens, for example. I'm going to go that other reference. I can still hear you. So go ahead and talk, Doc, and I'll go get this
Actually, David, I'm going to jump in real quick. Since we only have 40 minutes, let's forget whale evolution. It's not really on topic. You don't need to get the reference book. Let's just focus on the Genesis flood. I think we have more than enough to discuss. Matt, he's already done 12 minutes of announcements and reminders. And so we got that out of the way. So, gentlemen, Doc and David, let's just focus as much as we can on the Genesis flood. We'll save whale evolution for another debate.
Oh, okay. Very well. Very well.
Alrighty. Well, just Matt, I'm sharing a visual right now that might help the audience understand what we're talking about.
Yeah,
I got it up for you.
Yeah, that depiction of mountain building, don't have any problem at all with that. Okay. So you want to...
So you don't have any problem with it. So you accept that as mountains are built, the mountains obviously are pushed upward, but so is the surrounding crust, right?
Well, as a matter of fact, that diagram you have up, if you leave it for a moment, leads to one of my most recent arguments for problems with the evolutionary model of mountain building. If you go to the West Coast, there are some ultramafic rocks that I had a chance to do some field work in a couple of years ago, north of San Francisco. These are what are called blue schist facies rocks because they contain the mineral kyanite. One thing I'd like you to explain in regard to this diagram you put up is when you look at the mineralogy of these blue schist facies rocks, you got an enormous problem with disequilibrium. If these rocks really were uplifted slowly over millions of years, they should have had plenty of time to come to what a mineralogist and a petrologist calls equilibrium. Do you have an explanation for why they are in disequilibrium?
So I'm sorry, what are you defining as equilibrium versus disequilibrium?
Okay.
I think I might have missed that. Okay.
Part of this comes from physical chemistry and from phase diagrams for groups of minerals that make up green schist facies, blue schist facies, and so forth. I think that I'd like to defer on that. It would take most of our time just to outline the mineralogy and physical chemistry. We can go on to another argument.
Well, it's just, so I guess I'll just say we get blue schist through high pressure of igneous rocks. I believe it is mostly mafic rocks. High pressure, but relatively low temperature, which you can get at a oceanic continental subduction zone. Basically, as the oceanic rock is pushed under the continental rock, some of it can get brought up to the surface just through the mountain building, or you can have small areas of local overwriting of some oceanic rock. It's rare, but it happens. And I actually have seen that rock face you're talking about. I believe it is an example of that.
Well, thank you for putting that chart up, and let me give a critique of it. If you'll notice, the eclogite facies and blue schist facies that I was mentioning earlier, let's go over on the x-axis to around 800 degrees temperature, and then you go all the way up to the eclogite, which basically is 12 kilobars up to 18 kilobars. One of the creationist critiques that I would give of the traditional metamorphic petrology that you're looking at there is that some of the mineral assemblages in eclogites and in, let's see, blue schist facies rocks, I'll use those two as an example. They are in mineralogical disequilibrium. In other words, if they really had come to the surface in California, for example, over millions of years, they should have equilibrated mineralogically. That's the counter argument I was giving.
So are you saying the minerals in the rock should change when put under lower pressure?
Let's see. Let me try to say this more clearly. What's a good way to explain it? When you look at the mineral assemblages that are in a blue schist facies rock, and I'll use this one mineral as an example, the mineral kyanite. When you look at the crystallography and mineralogy of kyanite that is found in blue schist facies rocks, and also in eclogites and so forth. But at any rate, when you look at that kyanite, what my argument is if that blue schist facies unit was put into the crust over millions of years, the mineralogical equilibrium would have had plenty of time to establish itself. The creationist argument about blue schist and certain eclogites is that the minerals in there are not in equilibrium, which is what we would predict if they were rapidly emplaced over thousands of years rather than millions.
I'm not sure I understand why you're saying that, but also kyanite is fairly rare. More often than not, blue schist is blue because of other minerals like glaucophane. And
well,
I guess I just don't see why this is a problem.
Well, I'm questioning your knowledge of these metamorphic rocks. Again, I'll use California as an example. I, with my own eyes, have seen the kyanite in these areas north of San Francisco. And so the kyanite is not rare in those rocks. But let's put that to one side on the basis of time and go to another argument, if you don't mind.
All right. I'm sorry, your argument just wasn't making sense to me. But sure, we can move on.
Now, do you want me to bring up another problem, or do you have a response, Doc?
Well, so I guess all of this started because I was asking you if you had a problem with the at least current consensus on how mountain building is usually done, because it can cause uplift of the interior of a continental plate, not just the outside. And that explains why Texas has experienced a lot of uplift, why England has experienced a lot of uplift, and why Turkey has experienced a lot of uplift. Although Turkey is closer to the plate boundary, so it's more in the middle of the mountains. So if you accept our model of how the plates move around, and you accept our model of how mountains form and how uplift occurs, why do you not find that sufficient to explain the chalk deposits on the shorelines of, well, various places around the world? Like, why is that not sufficient?
Well, again, I think you're missing a point that Agar made uh, in his writings about the nature of the stratigraphical record. The issue is the issue of the surprising persistence of facies through time. Now, he's writing as an old Earth stratigrapher, but he's making the point that it's in his writings. He's making the point it's very odd to him as an evolutionary geologist that there should be such remarkable similarity between the Austin Chalk, the White Cliffs of Dover, and the deposits that are found on the north, in northern Turkey, right at the Black Sea.
I understand. Well, I understand that he finds it odd, but it makes sense if you understand the geological history of those areas. They're all from shallow water deposits. They all have experienced significant uplift. It makes sense that they would be similar, especially since it appears that they were all deposited at around the same time during the late Cretaceous. You'd expect the chalk to be similar. You'd expect the species to be similar. Species within the rock to be similar.
Okay, let's put that to one side and let's go to another unit. Why
put it to one side? Like, why does that not make sense? Why is that explanation incoherent to you?
Okay, let me frame that. You and I are arguing tonight about two competing models: an old Earth evolutionary model of the geology versus a young Earth catastrophic explanation. I think that I have an adequate explanation for why the Austin Chalk and the White Cliffs of Dover and northern Turkey would be similar, because I'm presenting an argument for what Tim Clary calls a unit that is what the petroleum geologists would call a lithologic package. They would use the argument from sequence stratigraphy. This is the idea that where it starts at the Salk and then comes up through the Tejas, different sequences of stratigraphic units. I think the flood model and this sequence stratigraphy argument provides a better explanation for the chalk deposits that we've talked about.
So, okay. So you're saying that all these chalks are similar because they were deposited in the same event. Am I understanding you correctly?
Yeah, that's correct. Now, again, don't trivialize my view of the flood.
I'm not trivializing it, David. I was just making sure I understood.
Well, but I want to make sure that the audience understands it. I'm not arguing for a flood that occurred over 40 days and 40 nights, but rather I'm arguing for a flood that lasted a complete year. And so during that time, there is adequate room, if you will, to explain something like these persistent facies.
All right. So with that in mind, so if all these were formed in the same event, and it was a global event, because we're talking about a global flood.
That's correct, lasting a year.
Well, just why are these chalk deposits only in these specific areas? Why isn't the entirety of the Earth covered in this exact same type of rock? An event, like you and I are geologists, we know that in an event that forms sediments or forms deposits, the sediment produced by that event is going to be fairly continuous. It's going to be fairly similar all the way through. So why don't we have chalk deposits like this all over the Earth if there was a global event that created these chalk deposits?
Well, my counter argument to that would be this: that if you start at the Austin chalk and go up through, let's imagine the continents being together now, not separate as they are now. You trace the Austin chalk up through the White Cliffs of Dover. There are similar chalk deposits in Germany, and then those deposits swing down through Eastern Europe and show up again in Turkey. And so my argument is that evidence for a worldwide flood would be a deposit like these chalks that extends over a broad area. But that's not the only thing. There are other arguments that are based around, for example, the persistence of a sandstone layer, such as occurs from the Grand Canyon and can be traced in the subsurface all the way up through the Chicago area, and then in the subsurface again over a lot of the subsurface of the United States. These persistent facies would be exactly what you would predict in a worldwide flood.
Okay. So I can get that you would say that there would be widespread facies, but that doesn't really So I guess if there were a worldwide flood, the worldwide flood would be depositing sediments throughout its duration. Do you agree with that?
Well, again, that ties into my thinking over the years about the worldwide flood. Because it lasted a full year and involved the breakup of tremendous amount of volcanic activity in the basins and erosive events lasting the entire year of this flood model. Not every unit would be globally persistent. One example I like to use in arguing with you about this is the appearance of the Cambrian red shales and limestones that are found again worldwide. If you look at the very famous type locality of the Cambrian in Wales, Dr. Adam Sedgwick took his class out there, and they saw these red rocks with trilobites in them. A green mineral called glauconite was associated with it. And so Sedgwick was teaching during the time that the British Empire was worldwide. So these young geologists went to India and Africa and all over the world with this idea of what the Cambrian looked like. So when they got to the southern Appalachian Mountains and they saw red sandstones and shales with the trilobite in it, they applied that word Cambrian. Now, in their minds and in that period of time, the word Cambrian, along with the word Ordovician and Silurian and Devonian, those rock units referred to geographic areas with certain lithologic types. Like the Triassic in Europe had 3 units that were similar. And so as they went worldwide, they applied these terms, and I'll go back to the Cambrian because it's one of the easiest to conceptualize. When these students got in different parts of the world and they saw this same kind of red sandstone with the trilobites in it, they applied the word Cambrian to it.
Okay, so I understand what you're saying there, but well, I guess it's just today we assign rocks as Triassic or Cambrian or Precambrian by their age, not by how the rocks appear on the surface. We have a more comprehensive understanding of how to date the rocks and such. And just
May I
don't think I don't think your explanation for there being persistent and non-persistent facies is convincing. A singular event, the global flood, should leave global flood deposits, and yet it doesn't. We have sandstone, we have chalk, we have mudstones, we have paleosols. I'm not sure how a soil with root systems preserved forms in a global flood, but apparently that happened multiple times in between other layers. Like,
let me give you an interesting
persistent
counter argument. Am I allowed to do that?
Yes, I'm just trying to address everything you brought up.
Oh, okay. Well, let me throw in an interesting counter argument to what you're saying about radiometric dates versus fossil dates and so forth. When I was working for the United States Geological Survey, my boss, my senior geologist, assigned me to look at some rock units in North Carolina, South Carolina, that he was trying to correlate with some limestones before they were metamorphosed. So at any rate, I spent quite a time looking into a group of rocks that go kind of cross the border between North Carolina and South Carolina. That's called the Murphy Marble Belt. Well, the Murphy Marble Belt was assumed to be a certain age. And the details slip me right now, but I think the Murphy Marble might have been associated with a Precambrian unit or maybe even a early Mesozoic. I can't remember the details. But during the time that I was studying this, a fossil trilobite was found in that Murphy Marble Belt. And that caused a big stir among the traditional stratigraphers. The man I was working for, Lynn Harris, was a carbonate stratigrapher. And for heaven's sakes, if you find a trilobite in the Murphy Marble Belt, that defines the age of it as being Cambrian. And he immediately threw out radiometric dates that had been established in some of the trace minerals in the Murphy Marble. A fossil to a traditional carbonate stratigrapher is a trump card.
No, it isn't. So fossils are useful. We have things called index fossils, which, based on sampling, can generally assign an age to a rock. It can assign a guess. However, we don't use fossils to absolutely date rock, or at least we rarely do. It's not quite a last-ditch effort, but it's fairly low on the priorities because we know that in the fossil record, we don't have a complete sampling of all of the fossils that have ever occurred, or of all the animals that have ever been alive, or plants. We know the fossil record is incomplete, so we rely on methods that are more certain, such as radiometric dating. Would you like to get into that?
Yeah, let me make a comment about that. In my experience with the United States Geological Survey, in my training at Tennessee and Michigan, the traditional stratigraphers put a lot of focus on the lithostratigraphic features. Give you an example. One of my professors was a carbonate petrologist, and he very much appreciated the difference between a like a dolomite and a limestone. And yet, when he was teaching us about some of the units in the Gulf of Mexico, he would draw on the board the units that are found there, some carbonates, some sandstone, some shales. And from the petroleum industry, going back to the late 1800s, it was known that if you found a particular type of fossil, a foram, at say 400 feet, that generally there would be some crude oil, maybe 100 feet below that. And then if you go further down, you would find another foraminifera, maybe 800 feet stratigraphically down in the Gulf of Mexico.
So,
And so as my professor would talk about this in class, and he was a vocal critic of creationism and was a Yale educated evolutionary geologist, you know, he would be amazed really that some micropaleontologist was trying to portray the evolution of one of these very small microfossils into another. And he taught us in class, he said, well, as far as that's concerned, they might as well be a fountain pen or a nut
well,
or a screw, you know, for all the evolutionary value that you would get from it.
David, I understand what you're saying, but when did you go to college? When did you graduate?
Undergraduate 74, graduate 79.
All right, so over 30 years.
Correct.
Well, actually, no, over 40. Our methods have changed since that time, and radiometric dating is incorporated a lot more now. We have better understanding of stratigraphy. We have better understanding of faulting, of mountain building. Like, our methods change as we get more data. And as it turns out, radiometric dating tends to be much more precise than just going by fossil assemblages. They can be used to try and get an idea of what spectrum of time you're looking at, but it's not always used.
Several opponents that I have faced on Standing for Truth over the last 2 years have used a very similar argument to me that essentially is almost an ad hominem argument, but not quite. It's an argument that goes something like, oh, McQueen, you're a 70-year-old man and so much has changed in the last 50 years. I find it fascinating that the same individuals that critique me in that way don't turn to Charles Darwin and say, oh, all that stuff that Darwin wrote, that was from his research in the 1830s and 1840s.
So
because
David,
it was a book published in 1859 doesn't mean it's wrong, does it?
David, I'm not saying you're wrong because you're old. I am saying that the information you are presenting is outdated. Older people can find new information and incorporate it into their findings. I know this because I have had plenty of older professors who have had to have their views change when new evidence was presented. You seem to be sticking to I don't even want to say 70s, a 50s to 60s understanding of modern geology, when it's been a lot of time since then. Many more discoveries have been made. We're much more precise now.
Yes, I am aware of what you're saying. How much time do we have left in this segment, moderator?
We're coming up on 34 minutes out of 40. However, because we have just a few questions, I will actually add more time to this. So you guys can stay on what you're talking about. I recommend changing because you went down kind of a radiometric dating. I would rather David try to convince him more of the evidence of just on the global flood thing rather than the date of when it happened, because you believe in catastrophe.
Yeah, let me switch back to that, and you're doing a good job in keeping us on task here. Let me use another line of argument about the worldwide flood, because I'm convinced that at the beginning of the flood, the continents were together into essentially, if you were to look down from space into it, it would be a C-shaped mass. Some of you that know the vocabulary of this part of geology would talk about Gondwana land and the Tethys Sea and so forth. So I don't have any problem with those continental masses being together. The issue that I have about the traditional evolutionary old Earth view of continental separation and so forth is the idea that, okay, you've got the subcontinent of India that in the evolutionary view is quite a bit south of China. And then that subcontinent moves up and collides with China, the plate there, and produces the Himalayan mountains. And when I look at the geologic evidence in that area of Everest and so forth, it seems like the forces involved in producing K2, Everest, and that whole area there would not be adequate to explain what you actually find there, because you do indeed, in some of the units on Everest, I don't remember what elevation they are, find fossil-bearing units. Could you explain that to me, brother?
Just so you know, Doc, he believes in catastrophic plate tectonics, model of the flood.
Yeah, I know the model. So, a couple things. First, I really quick want to ask, please stop saying the evolutionary model. Evolution has nothing to do with what we're talking about right now, and you should know this. Next, so what you're essentially saying is if this took millions of years for India to collide with China and produce the Himalayas, it shouldn't have enough energy to produce that much uplift through the collision? Is that essentially what you're saying, if it took place over millions of years?
Let's see. Let me address that. First of all, because the overall worldview that we're arguing tonight involves an evolutionary viewpoint of the origin of continents and of the origin of life and so forth, I think you're inappropriately critical of me for using that word, but I'll put that to one side. Let's go back to the formation of Mount Everest. If we have competing models for the origin of the Himalayan mountains, my argument is that a young Earth catastrophic model can explain the formation of the Himalayas as well as, if not better than, an evolutionary model.
And on what basis are you saying that? And essentially, you just said yes. You think it's too slow in the old Earth model. Like, you just said yes. Why do you think that?
Okay. Let's take a different approach here. One of the things I can remember teaching about in regard to the first British surveys of the magnetism and a sense of the mass of the crust as you go from southern India all the way up to the Himalayas is the model that these British scientists had in the early part of the century when they were doing these surveys going up toward the Himalayas. They couldn't understand why their equipment was behaving in the way that it was because they were using an old geosynclinal idea of where the rocks might have come from. The flood geology model that I propose or suggest is not one based on the old geosynclinal idea of how mountain building occurred. And so I think of the modern creationist explanation as being having more explanatory power in having India move up
So,
in a several thousand-year framework to form the Himalayas.
so David, I asked why you think it's more convincing. You just said, I find it more convincing. Why?
Well,
Why can
okay.
why can the old or why is the old Earth model not sufficient? Why?
Okay. I think I would answer that this way, that the geophysical signature as you go from South India up there to the Himalayas is better explained by the rapid collision, in terms of the age of the Earth, rapid collision of the Indian subcontinent with that part of Asia. So that
Okay,
would be my explanation.
So can you give I suppose, a concise definition for a geophysical signature?
Yes, I can do that. Let's see if I could draw something on the whiteboard here that would help you and the audience to better understand this. We can get rid of all this stuff here. Got to get a better eraser for this thing. This cloth is not doing a good job. Let me try to mark off an area here. Okay, this is China, and this is northern India. In this area, when the geophysical surveys were done, they began in the south of India and then worked their way up to northern India. And as they were doing these surveys, they had expectations of what the gravitational signature would be as they moved up in this way. And as they got closer and closer to this boundary of the faulting of the Himalayas, they found that their assumptions, let me try to get some of the glare off of this screen. They found that their assumptions about a geosynclinal model were simply not true. That as they went up this way from the south to the north, I don't know if the audience has ever heard this word. There's a type of geophysical signature. It's called a Bouguer anomaly. It has to do with the gravitational attraction of things. It's the nature of the gravity in this area, the gravitational signature, I think best fits a flood model, young Earth model.
Okay. Okay. So, in other words, their understanding of the shape of the Indian subcontinent was wrong. So,
Yeah,
all right,
that's correct.
So,
but go ahead.
something I do want to bring up, though. So, if you're going to shorten the amount of time that it took for the continents to move in their current position, you're going to wind up releasing a lot of heat. I know you and Donny have talked before about solving the heat problem from radiometric decay. I'm still waiting to hear the explanation on that. But you run into another heat problem when you try to speed up the movement of the continents. Now, I cannot do the math myself, but I do have some friends who work with physics quite a bit, and they have run the calculations. If you want to move the continents from a Pangea shape, or Gondwana, to their current positions within the span of 1 year, you would turn the planet into a ball of plasma. The oceans would be gone, the surface would be gone, all life would just be gone. There is not enough mass on Earth, or I believe several times the mass of Earth is not enough to absorb all the heat that would be released from the continents suddenly moving and suddenly stopping. The surface would be molten. Where did the heat go in your model? Because there has to be heat released by friction when two surfaces move over each other.
I hope my colleague George Bond in Australia watches this in the days ahead. He and I have puzzled over this very heat issue, and one of the explanations, I think, two possible explanations for this heat problem that you're pointing out is if this is the ocean of Noah's Day, and then this is the top of the this is the crust, and then here's the mantle. If you go down into the mantle, in places, it's shown best in places like the Hawaiian Islands, there is underneath there what is called a BLOB, a blob of mantle underneath these areas. And we've been working on the physics of how you run this in reverse. there was this source of heat underneath Yellowstone National Park or underneath the Hawaiian Islands. This source of heat is the geophysics of it is run up in the sense of providing heat from the mantle to the crust. Well, he and I are working on a mechanism of a heat sink that might be bringing heat from this area down into the mantle and using that as a explanation from a flood geology standpoint of how you could get the heat that would be generated by a continental collision down back into the mantle.
David, I don't think you're understanding what I'm saying. There is not enough mass on the planet to absorb the heat I'm talking about. Everything from the inner core to the lithosphere would be completely molten, if not converted straight to plasma by the heat. We roughly know the temperature of the mantle. We roughly know the temperature of the core of the Earth as well.
4 minutes.
I believe most of that comes from deflection in seismic data. I could be incorrect on that, but we do have an idea of how hot the interior of the Earth is, and there's just not enough. Even if, let's say the whole planet was ice, let's say the entire planet, even to the core, was 0 degrees Celsius, the Earth would have still become molten from the continental crusts abruptly starting to move and abruptly stopping.
Well, let me put a piece of seismic data into this discussion, and then you explain it to me. If you go to where are some good examples? I can use this same little diagram here. And let's talk about the crust mantle boundary west of Washington, Oregon, and California, out in that part of the plate. If you look in that area geophysically, you find what the geophysicists call cold crust, big units of cold crust that are that have been subducted. And again, this is California here, that have been subducted. And so as George and I have looked at the physics of this, if the Earth was truly old, there should be plenty of time to have absorbed this cold crust in the mantle. And again, it becomes an issue of equilibration. It's out of equilibrium, and we would use the argument the reason it's out of equilibrium is that the Earth is young, not old.
All right. So I will address this, but I do want to make a note that you didn't answer my question at all. I'm asking you where the heat went from the continents sliding around. You have given me no answer. You are deflecting to another topic. That said, so we do have what we call cold slabs, or oceanic plates, usually, dipping into the mantle, into the asthenosphere and then the mantle at convergent plate boundaries. We do have those. And you're asking why they are still, quote unquote, cold if they've been going down for so long.
Yes.
Well, when we look at these cold slabs, again, I don't know the exact mechanism we use to analyze the heat, but we can. And what we see is they start out cold, meaning a couple hundred degrees Celsius at the very, like, near the surface. And as you go farther and farther down, they get hotter and hotter until they disappear from the readings, meaning that they are functionally at the same temperature as the mantle in that area. So either they've been incorporated into it, or they're just the same temperature and we can't read them anymore. So they do heat up eventually. As for why they remain cool for so long, that's actually an interesting question. So these subducting oceanic plates are very, very saturated with water because they've been under the ocean. And water absorbs heat very well. So it absorbs heat from the surrounding asthenosphere, from the surrounding mantle, and the water escapes, taking the heat with it. That helps keep it cool. It's the same system as when you sweat. You sweat, water collects on you, it absorbs the heat, evaporates away, cooling you down. Same thing happens with these cold slabs. It then goes upward, and that's often why we get volcanoes at convergent plate boundaries. Because the water comes up, reduces the melting temperature of the rock, and lets it melt and form volcanoes. So we have a mechanism for why cold slabs remain cold.
Let me ask our moderator, how close are we to the audience Q&A now?
We're over it. I was just letting it go on because we only had a couple questions. So I'll give you 2 minutes to respond to this, and then we'll do the closing statements and then jump into it. Okay?
Okay, very well. My response to that is this. As George and I have done research on these objects that are called blobs, BLOBS, that are at depth at the crust mantle boundary and below, some of these units are some of these objects, I guess you would call them, are associated with the Hawaiian island chain. Now, this is a cross section here. Let me switch this around now and draw a map view of the Hawaiian Islands through, even in a young Earth viewpoint, they have shown changes with time. And so now we're looking at a map, with this being north. If I can draw an N here accurately. And it is true that you can trace the growth, if you will, of the Hawaiian Island chain with time from the southeast to the northwest in that area of the Pacific Ocean. When we've looked at the movement in this period of time, we don't see a necessity for this movement to be very slow, but rather it could occur rapidly. And the physics that we're working on is what is the physics? What are the equations that would allow heat to be drawn down? I'll make this three-dimensional here, into the lower crust and upper mantle. And let me see if I brought in with my stuff here a discussion of that. I did not. the argument that we would use for this tremendous amount of heat being taken down is, and I can't remember the exact name, but I'll use the word mineral creep. And this is a movement along the plains of minerals like micas.
1 minute.
Okay, back over to you. I'm done with that comment.
Oh, okay. Actually, that does it. That was almost an hour you guys have been going. So we're going to go to 5-minute closings. Since you started, David, we will have you go last. And Doc, you can take it away whenever you like.
Sure. Well, just as a quick response to that,
Sure.
I frankly don't know too much about the subject you're talking about. My field of study is paleontology. This is not my field, but I can say that we have determined the ages of the Hawaiian Islands. Here they are in terms of millions of years. And as you can see, the older or the farther you get along the chain, the older they get, until you get to Hawaii as it currently stands, which is currently erupting. As for, I guess, general closing, this has been fun. I don't feel like many of my questions were fully answered. I feel like there were a lot of deflections and jumping to different topics, which I am sad to see. Also, I find it interesting that you completely dropped paleobotany. But that's just a side note. If you want to talk about whale evolution in the future, I'd be down for that. It's actually a topic I am very fascinated by, even though I like dinosaurs. But I think that'll do for my closing. Thank you again, David. Thank you, Donny. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, everyone in the audience. And if you want the discussion to keep going, I'll be hosting an after show when this debate is finished.
All right.
Thank you for telling me about that. I've appreciated this debate also.
All right, David, your turn for a closing.
Okay, good. I realize that at the very beginning of this debate, my opponent preferred not to talk about the Bible in any way, the historicity of the Bible, the fact that it's a trustworthy document. But in my closing, I do want to bring it up as an important issue to me, because if all I knew was the vertebrate paleontology I've been taught, the paleobotany I've been taught over the years of my training, I would not have a framework to understand what rocks might be associated with the creation week, such as Bob Gentry's granites, for example, why the granites would form a foundation of the continental masses, and then there are sedimentary rocks that are on top of those. From my viewpoint, the fact that sedimentary rocks are found on top of granites and metamorphic rocks that contain no fossils is a powerful argument for a worldwide flood. Worldwide flood would predict that we would find rocks from creation, which would be rocks without fossils. Now, how biblically would you know that? Well, a fossil is an evidence of death, and there was no death at creation. Death came later on as a punishment of God on the whole creation. And so finding fossil-bearing rocks on top of rocks without fossils is an overall model that supports what the Bible says. one of the topics I was going to bring up earlier was a biblical topic. You know, for many years, critics of the Bible said, "Oh, the Bible talks about the Hittite nation in the Old Testament. There's no evidence of the Hittite nation." And then as archaeologists, secular archaeologists, have looked into this as the years have gone on, they have discovered that this group of people that the Bible talks about, the Hittites, were really a very large population and in the exact area that the Bible talks about. Now, the way that impacts me personally is there are areas of Bible history, like the birth of Abraham being around 2000 BC, the fact that the Lord Jesus died and was resurrected. There's historical data, evidence for that. And so, since I can find beyond the 12th chapter of Genesis points of history that exactly correlate with what the Bible says, that allows me to then go back to Genesis 1 with full confidence that it is presenting the two things that the old German theologians would talk about. It produces a Weltbild, in other words, a picture of the world, but also what the old German theologians called a Weltanschauung, a viewpoint of the world, a understanding of the world. And I find those 2 points very satisfying. Thank you.
All right. We are going to close it up with a Q&A. We're going to begin with you, David. The first one is about a global flood. If it occurred, why didn't the freshwater fish die? Were they on the ark as well?
Yeah, this is a question that I often get when we speak about this, when I speak about this. And my thoughts of it are in this way. If you think of the complexity of Noah's ocean, as there was erosion from the continent and salts like sodium, elements like sodium flowed into the ocean and created a salty layer, there would be a stratification of the ocean water, where one zone would be more freshwater and another zone would be more salty. And so we know that as the floodwaters receded, these fish would have been dropped into different basins around the world. But an important point I want to make on this is that many of the freshwater fish did die. These are fish like are found in the Green River formation in Wyoming. Your point is very well taken. No evidence of any aquaria on board the ark, and so they survived outside the ark.
Got it. Okay, next question.
Sorry, can I comment on that super quick?
Yes, absolutely. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Actually, I'm just going to jump in, gentlemen,
Hmm?
just for the audience sake, and then also for you, Doc, and David. What we should do for the Q&A is our typical format. So let's say the question's for David. David, you can respond. And then Doc, you can have a response. And then David, you get the last word. So basically 3 responses per. Okay, cool. Matt, you got this.
Okay.
Thank you, Donny.
All right. So what was I going to? Oh, yeah. So, sorry, you just brought up the Green River Formation. I love the Green River Formation. It's beautiful. I actually have a fish fossil from there. Absolutely adore it. And the Green River Formation also has a seasonal varve sequence that in total goes between 5 and 8 million years. So it's just interesting.
Comment.
Okay, my response then to that is the issue of varves whether you're talking about varves in ice or varves in the Green River, that can be caused by sedimentological aspects of the deposition of that unit. It does not necessarily have to be some sort of annual varving.
All right, we're going to move on. And the next one, this one is for you, Doc Dino. Why are the same layers in the geologic column found across the world if there was not a worldwide flood?
Interesting question. So I do want to say that not all of the layers are found everywhere in the world. Geology is a very complicated discipline, and different rock layers outcrop in different places. And even when we find rocks of the same age in different places, they can be different. Just because environments aren't all the same. Think of America. In the east we have woods, in the middle we have Great Plains, southwest we have deserts, etc. The ancient world was like it too. So fossils can vary.
All right, a response to that, David?
Yes, the issue of the same layers being found around the world, it turns out that, again, my favorite rock unit, the Cambrian of Wales looks like the Cambrian of the Southern Appalachian Mountains. It looks like the Cambrian at the base of the Grand Canyon, that's a peat sandstone. And I always have to put a caveat when I say something like that, because keep in mind a comment I made earlier that the Reverend Adam Sedgwick, when he taught these young geology students in the 1850s, 1860s, they left the Cambrian of Wales and then went worldwide. And whenever they saw a red limestone with glauconite and trilobites, they applied the word Cambrian to it. And in their minds, I don't think they knew, or maybe they did know, that these terms were actually geographic terms coined by creationists. The Devonian, the Devonshire area had predominantly fish fossils. And so you can go around the world like that. So that would be my counter on that.
All right, Doc, and back to you.
I mean, geology is complicated, like I said earlier. Also, if I might suggest, I don't know how many questions we have. Maybe we should go with like a minute for answer, 30 seconds for response, 30 seconds for response. Keep
Sure.
every question within 2 minutes, just to help.
Okay, this one is directly for David McQueen. Do you consider the flood theory scientific? If yes, can you list us one or more of the falsification criteria for that theory? What would falsify?
Yeah, I do consider the global flood a scientific model. And because it's a scientific model, there has to be some way to falsify it. And so the falsification of the model, in my mind, involves the occurrence of human fossils. A falsification of the global flood idea would be if we were able to, or if we did find human fossils associated with the Ordovician and the Triassic and all the way up through what the traditional geologist calls the Cenozoic. I did field work in Peru on a Eocene unit that was supposed to have a human fossil in it. Turns out it wasn't a human fossil. It was a misunderstanding of a photograph. Thank you. Back to you.
Okay. If you want to say anything about that, feel free, Doc, or else we can move on.
I'm good.
Okay. The next one, we got a super chat that came in real quick. Simple answer, David, yes or no. Do you understand how radiometric dating works?
Yes, I do.
There it is. Okay, question for both of you then, coming up. Scientifically, what needs to be demonstrated before you can accept that there was a worldwide flood, or before you can reject a worldwide flood? It was for both of you, so Doc, take it away.
Sure. So, for me to accept there was a worldwide flood, it'd be pretty simple. Just show me the worldwide flood deposits. We know what flood deposits look like, even at large scales. If there was a global one, we should see them, and we don't. Instead, we see an interconnected mix of rock layers of different origins, different times, and even going by our youngest estimates, like Charles Lyell did, all the way back at the dawn of geology, still get to at least a few 100,000 years. And his methods weren't perfect, but even going by them. So there we go.
Okay, I'll give my response here. What would I find that would cause me to reject the worldwide flood? If we were to find in a sequence of rocks like the Green Canyon, or a sequence of rocks, one of the best preserved sequences that starts in the traditional Precambrian, Mesozoic, Paleozoic, Cenozoic, Mesozoic, is in Northwest Africa, Morocco. If I could be taken there, and then I'm walking up these rocks that I would have considered before to be flood year rocks, if I go up to a certain point and find trilobites and human fossils, then I keep going and I find fish and human fossils, then I keep going and I find human fossils scattered throughout that sequence, that would argue against a worldwide flood to me.
Okay. Doc, any last words?
Not at the moment, other than David. I think your wife is talking on the phone in the background. It's bothering a lot of people in the chat.
Okay. All right. Last question coming in. David McQueen, it's for you. If the continents were still floating on a layer of water and the atmosphere was expanding, wouldn't that lessen the heat and dissipate some of it? So for the heat problem, the continental movement. Right?
Yeah. Those of you that have studied the different viewpoints of individuals on the creation side may have heard of what's called a hydroplate model. And this is what this is a reference to. I reject the hydroplate model. I don't think there was a layer of water that the continents were moving on top of. My formal training is as a groundwater geologist, and it's simply not the case that we find evidence of that in the rock record.
All right, Doc, you were up.
I'm good.
Okay. That was pretty much it. That does it for time. And if you guys want to head over to Doc channel, feel free to leave a link in the description or in the live chat right now to your channel, since you were going to be doing the after show. I don't see anyone else that had posted.
Sure. I can't post links in Donny's chat. Here it is in the private chat if you want to share it.
Okay.
I will say it is an open mic after show. Anyone is welcome, be they creationist or not. Yeah, come have some fun. I'll start in about 5 minutes.
And I'll comment again. I want to thank you once again for being part of this debate. You've done a very sophisticated job. I will not join the after show simply because my wife and I have spent most of the day with an elaborate garage sale, and I just have run out of steam and also about to run out of voice. You and I will debate again, okay?
Sure. If you want to talk about whale evolution, that sounds fun to me.
Very good. I'll go ahead and move down and leave the studio. My thanks to you and Donny and all the team at Standing for Truth, okay? Good night.
All right, everyone. Have a good night.
Oh, I
And see you
forgot
next
to
time.
tell a joke. George
Oh,
always
no, go
tells a
ahead.
joke. You got to have a joke. How come you can't How come you can't trust a staircase? The answer is it's always up to something. A staircase
Nice.
is always up to something. That's a terrible joke. Bye-bye.